Inverse of square root function. Find inverse of y equals to square root of x minus 5 is the inverse of this function of function. Now my recommendation is that whenever you find inverse of a square root function, since it has the restricted domain, we should first look into its domain and range and then do the algebra part of finding inverse. So let's look into the function as such first so that I can make my point absolutely clear to you. So let's first sketch this function. It is y equals to square root of x minus 5. That means square root x is moving 5 units to right. So that is how the function should look like, where this point is 5. Now if we say inverse of this function, basically graphically we can say reflected on the line y equals to x, right? Now if you do that, your function should look like a half of a parabola, right? Which is kind of reflected like this, so it will be like this, right? So half parabola where x is greater than equal to 0, and that is your y point. So that is your function, let us say f of x. In that case, this is f inverse of x, right? So that is what you are expecting as your result. Now what I'm trying to tell you is, first write down domain range of the function. So the function given to us is y equals to square root of x minus 5. Now domain of this function is x belongs to real numbers where x is greater than equal to 5, right? Sometimes we write for every, we like this also, x is greater than equal to 5. And as the range is concerned, let me write capital R, is y belongs to real numbers where y is greater than equal to 0. So that is the domain and range of the function. Now for inverse, domain and range switches, right? So for inverse, what is going to be the domain and range? That is what we should write down. For inverse, domain will become range of the function, right? They switch. So it becomes x belongs to real numbers where x should be greater than equal to 0. And as far as the range is concerned, this is for the inverse function, right? It has to be y belongs to real numbers where y is greater than equal to 5. Now from the diagram it is very clear, correct? So that is how it should be. Now once you do this part, I'm sure you will not make a mistake while calculating inverse algebraically. Now that is a must to do. Well, let's move on to the second part also. It says, is the inverse of this function a function? Well, we can say yes it is, right? So we have answered in a way both the questions. But let's find out the inverse of the function algebraically. So how do we calculate that part? So for that, first step is, so we are trying to find inverse. So first step will be, we'll swap x and y, is that okay? And then we'll calculate for y. So these are the steps to be followed. So when you do that, we get x equals to square root of y minus 5. And to get the value of y, we'll square both sides. Say x squared equals to y minus 5. And from here, we can write down y equals to x squared plus 5. Now, if you do only this part, then you'll end up writing y equals to x squared plus 5. Remember, x squared is a parabola which really does not have any restriction in its domain. But the inverse function, as you saw here, is restricted. Its domain should be greater than equal to 0. That is very important. And therefore, when we do this part and we switch, we should write in the very beginning that here x is greater than equal to 0. Right? X cannot be negative in this part. Do you understand? Because it's a square root thing. So whenever you do square root, you are expecting a positive answer. You see that? That is the reason why we have to write x is greater than equal to 0. Well, when you square it, you square even the negative quantities and make an error. So this error has to be avoided. And remember, therefore, to always write x greater than equal to 0 as you move along. I hope you appreciate that part, right? And that is the reason why we went from the graph to give you an idea that the inverse has a restriction, x is greater than equal to 0. You can see that? And then you can also get the same result by flipping or swapping domain and range of function and inverse function, right? So these are very important things, and that is a common error, not writing x greater than equal to 0. Now we get our answer, and that is inverse function is equals to x squared plus 5, where x is greater than equal to 0, right? So that is our answer. That is our answer, right? And now coming back to the second part, is the inverse of this function a function? So the answer is yes. Inverse is also a function, right? So I hope that clearly tells you how should we go about finding inverse of a square root function. For that matter, inverse of any function where domain and range is restricted. You should be very careful about their domain range. I hope you appreciate it. Thank you.